Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Things We Know. I'm Lisa Callahan.
And I'm Carrie Morin.
And today we're going to talk about quality of life through the decades.
I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. We talk about all the time how we love getting feedback from our listeners, and this actually came from a listener. I'm going to call her our number one fan. I'm sorry, guys, if you all think you're
It might be my mom too. She might be tied with my
also,
mom.
that's true. I think so. Anyways, it's fellow podcaster Julie Stoltz. She suggested this as a topic, and we thought it was perfect timing because we have a couple of other cool guests coming on right after this that are going to speak to the decades that Kari and I are not yet in. So I'm excited to share what you and I think makes quality of life in the decades, over the decades.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I have no complaints currently about the 50s. I'm liking this one. I am solidly in the middle at 54.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be the eyesight thing. I might have a few kind of grumbles, but and I've loved my 40s and 50s. I can't remember entering a decade before that where I was like, yes. I actually don't remember turning 20 and being like, this is the best ever. I don't remember it. I mean, I remember everything about that time, but I don't remember that feeling of being like, I'm in my 20s now. I think I was just distracted or focused or something on other things at the time. I always look back and think, and we'll get into this in a minute, but I feel like the 20s, like your confidence is way too high and your knowledge is really low.
Yeah, for real.
And so I don't think I was like evaluating it or having any meta awareness at the time. But in 30s, I think I remember turning 30 and wanting that to feel special. But gosh, because like entering 40, I felt so good. And 50s has been the same. So yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if turning 20 is not a big deal because turning 18 and 21 is.
It's true. You're right.
Like 20 is just like, I'm not quite there yet. I've already been an adult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I also don't remember turning 20. I remember turning 21 because I had mono, so that sucked. And then 30s, I had just done my first AIDS ride. So I remember that being a big piece of like I was so proud of having done that before I turned 30. And then I think on my 40th birthday, I wrote something very snarky about how much better I felt physically in my 40s than my 20s. And then when you talk about the things I don't like about the 50s, it's the aches and pains. I mean, I don't mind the eyesight thing, but the stiffness and the aches and pains is the one thing that bums me out in my 50s, which you've already talked about with menopause, hip, and all that jazz.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like my I always cringe a little bit and I don't know why, because it's not like I wouldn't want my kids to hear me go, I hated my 30s, because that's when they were all coming into my world. And I think because of the work and the growth and just the natural progression of, awareness, self-awareness and learning about the importance of self-care. And I think 30s were way too focused on others. It doesn't mean I didn't fall in love 3 magical moments when they came into my world. It doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of it I didn't love, but learning how to work and parent and like have your body just do all kinds of things you never, thought was physically good or possible was humbling, I think. And there's a lot of try hard energy, like I want to be good at this, I want to be good at this, I want to feel good at this, I want to somehow recapture something that I used to be, like there's just a lot of pressure I put on myself. So I think about the 30s as like the hardest. And so when I was coming into the 40s, when my kids were kind of old enough to do their own things, wipe their own butts, like all that kind of, pack their own bags, I just remember feeling really like young and strong and like sexy in a way I never had before.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, obviously this is again, we say this all the time, but this is the things we know. So we're presencing this as 2 54-year-old white women, quite frankly. So this is our experience. And obviously there's lots of things that factor into your quality of life in any given decade. But I would kind of like to start by talking about each of the decades a little bit and what sort of reflecting kind of like we did on the things we wish we knew. So if we were thinking about our teens, gosh, I don't know, we both have late teens
Mhm.
kids, right? And I do see that sense of like there's a lot of fun in this time. Miles and Charlotte are both late high school. Miles is going to be or is a junior, right? Charlotte's a senior.
Yes.
So this is that fun time, right, where you're the big cheese at school, and there's lots going on, and there's lots of fun things, and you're still in that. I don't know that they know this, but they're still in that sweet spot of living at home, not have to worry about it, really being held, and also having a taste of freedom. Like that's a
Yes,
pretty fun fucking time.
that's true. It's interesting because I think about all these, I feel like from our points of view, all this is going to feel really true. But if you're in those decades, you're going to be like, what? I'm so stressed. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
like you come from all these things. Like we're looking at it going, are you kidding me? It's just like when, I don't know if you've seen that meme, like, I don't understand children, like someone making you eat dinner and putting you to bed. Like we're dying for that now, right?
Right.
Those
Yeah.
used to be punishments. Go home early, go to bed early. You
Couldn't
have
wait
to
to
eat your
stay up.
vegetables. Yeah.
Yeah. And now it turns out
Uh,
staying up as an adult is 9 o'clock.
yes. Yes. But I do feel like it is there's something that I feel like threads through so many of our episodes and just who you and I are and why we're friends is that we really enjoy the work of self-awareness. Like it's not even
True.
work. And so I think what you're invited to do in your teens when you don't yet have those responsibilities is learn about yourself, others in the world. What we wish so badly we could say to our former selves and what we want so badly for our kids now and all kids we know is to really, like see everything is happening for you. Is that actually
Yeah.
happening? No. And in fact, we talked about this with our sons when they were on. This idea of being special sucks until you're ready for it. When you really do want to stand out, you tend to be a little older or just really uniquely mature at a younger age. Your kid's at a school for performing arts, so hopefully that is being infused and they do want to stand
Right.
out. But in general development, you don't want to stand out too much. And
Such a good point.
so there's this keep your head low, swim along, get along, hopefully be included, and smile and nod until you find your comfortable spot. That's kind of how I think of the teens. And
Yeah.
a lot of 20s are like that for people too.
Well, so let's move on to the 20s. I mean, to me, like 20s is finding your first job. Um, I know there's a lot of talk these days about the economy and how hard it'll be for kids getting out of college to find a job. I don't remember it being a cakewalk for us either, quite frankly. I mean, what we're talking early 90s. I mean, the economy wasn't great then either. I lucked out that my dad bought a shop and I got to work with him. That was my first job out of college. And then it just, like anything, you network and you get jobs and keeps going. But to me, God, I'm a straight up my 20s blew. They were,
Really?
yeah, I mean, Darren and I had a lot of relationship issues, mid
Mm.
90s. Ultimately, we did end up moving to Chicago and got married. So late 90s was great. Yeah, spoiler alert.
This story is only sad if you haven't been paying attention to the fact that they're together now.
That's true. Yeah. So there's no sad trombones. But it's funny because I mean, and you know this, we're going through our storage and we're taking Darren and I both, and we've infused this in the kids. We love to keep things and nostalgia things. And, I just found all of my concert tickets. Oh my God, that was so fun going through that last night. But I found some journals, and I'm not a journaler, but apparently I journal in the moments where the most intense shit is happening for me. And so I found journals from the mid 90s, and my memory of I knew what had happened, but I also I did not remember. I had totally forgotten how affected I was. And so to read these journals, really pouring my heart just breaking. So yeah, my 20s until about 27, 28 kind of sucked. Not gonna
Wow.
lie. Yeah.
I'm just learning this in real time. That's interesting. And it makes sense actually, because I know these other stories, but to hear
Right.
you encapsulate it that way, I think we talked about this just the other night, that it's kind of normal for our kids in their 20s to question life. It is that quarter life crisis invitation. And I think they're even more justified to have it, given that they're the generation that has been clouded by so many big things in the world. Of course, it's like, why work so hard? What is this all
Yeah.
for? So I
Yeah.
do think a lot of that can happen in the 20s. I feel like I am somebody who's like really comfortable admitting that I don't like, I mean, I think I don't want to discredit myself and say I didn't have self-awareness. I did, but to the extent that I really knew who I was and what I feel. And at this point, the human design episode is out. So like what I can look back now and realize is that as a projector, I did need to go out in the world and be independent to figure out what I felt about things. Like, were my politics my parents, were my politics my own? And I kind of already knew that, but finding the words and the feelings and the experiences for it
Yep.
were super important to me. And while my brother and sister were really dutifully, not, I don't mean, they were not at all robotic. They were both really successful, but they both kind of, responded to my dad's being like, you graduate from college, you get a job. And
Mm.
I was moving towards that and doing some interviews and feeling nothing, and like kind of trying to randomly figure out what I wanted to do, and got some decent offers and ideas about possibilities, but I don't know. I can't remember. I think it was my sister, actually. I got to credit Julia for a lot, but I think she's the one who said, you should look into Jesuit Volunteer Corps, because I was thinking a lot about the Peace Corps. And because I am the youngest and was kind of feeling sappy and worried, my grandmother wasn't in good health. My family was like going to be in 5 different places. And so Jesuit Volunteer Corps was sort of a similar type of placement, but in this country, right? And so
Yeah.
I applied, and it was an extensive thing. Like, I talk about self-awareness. I grew a lot because I had to ask friends for peer recommendations. I had to write a lot of essays, and I was comfortable writing, always have been, but it was like really deep stuff about social justice and
Mm.
spirituality and all that. And so it was kind of big for me, and I got it, and I got placed in Washington D.C., which was just the whole gateway to a lot of the rest of my life. Brendan,
Yeah.
who I had lost touch with, all during college, was in med school there, so I
Mm.
ran into him there, which was awesome. But also, intensive experience living in a city fraught with, I mean, it was the murder capital at the time.
Yeah. Again,
And we were all
90s.
placed
Yeah.
in these community organizations. So I was working with and advocating for homeless elderly. So I have to say, it ignited something very exciting that stayed with me. Well, till today, but definitely for my 20s. It defined my 20s, because then, and again, the place in your 20s where you have all this confidence and very little, like I would come home and just get in my parents' face. And, I'd been at marches, and I work with these welfare moms, like like I knew everything, right? I just had all this big passion, and I had all this stuff to put with it. But it defined like this career. I started in nonprofit and towards, education in high risk schools and all that. So for me, the 20s was all about activism and really standing into it, and like really getting to know who I was, which is what a lot of people did in college. And I probably had beginnings of that, but I really embraced it. But it was also like, I don't want to say it wasn't at all poverty, but it was seriously like making beans and rice stretch for weeks and
Oh,
things like,
for real. Oh my God. Yeah.
it
25-cent
was,
boxes of mac and
yeah,
cheese. Oh yeah.
it
Yeah.
was incredible. Like,
For
I
real.
thought my senior year of college, after I came back from studying abroad and had, well, actually the second half, had no money, eating like boxes of rice from my brother who worked for Kraft at the time. I thought that was like really stretching it, but really, truly. And so when you're in Jesuit Volunteer Corps, you get $85 spending a month. Like, we had to stretch that. And my roommate
Holy
and I
shit.
went down to like a pub one time. We were like, we'd saved it. And we were like, 2 harps, please, which is basically really expensive, because it's Irish, Coors Light, or Bud Light or something. It was
Yeah.
like,
Budweiser, I'd say. Yeah.
that'll be $14. And this was in 1991.
Oh my God. That's expensive back then. Holy
I know.
shit.
And we were like, we're not eating for a week. We sipped it really slow. We were at the Irish Times pub. I don't know why we thought it would be any different, but
should have got a Guinness. It could have held you over a little bit longer.
yeah. And the fun part about that was like, it really made us resourceful. Like, I'm sure you remember that. Like in DC, you could do all those things for free, all those cultural things for free. And So like it defined kind of who I was career wise, the kind of work I was looking for, and like finding my voice. So I really look at it. And then like after JVC, the first job I got, I thought it was the richest person alive because they offered me $20,000 a year. That was my first salary. And I shared an apartment with two other people. And I was like, I'm rich. It was with
They
it like an
love you.
AmeriCorps program. Oh, it was so good. So I look back at that and think like, oh, like that movie, I think it's Raising Arizona, the salad days or something
Yeah.
like when they refer like that's was the
Yeah.
salad days. Um, and like I think 30s again for me, because I got married at 26, didn't have kids till I was 32. So 30s for me definitely was where like my body for the first time started to kind of put on weight. I never really thought about it till then. And that Saturn rising,
Mhm.
that was happening to me. I got like melasma on my face, like everything about my body started to feel different and hormonal. And I was moving, like, we were in New Orleans and Nashville and then Portland. So it's just a lot of redefining. And I was in grad school during that time, which was fun and stressful because I was working full time and in grad school. So I think about 30s, like all of that moving into motherhood as like a blip. Like I got zapped by a UFO and taken away and then dropped back in my 40s or something. It's not like it wasn't fun up there. It's just, it's like a foreign time. So yeah, and 40s to me, man. Yeah. Anyway, we were talking about 20s. So that's me.
okay. Well, then for me, 30s was similar. I had Liam when I was 32 and Charlotte when I was 36. So yeah, it was it was definitely child rearing. I was somebody who didn't think I was going to have kids until I decided to have kids. And so I really loved being a mom. And I loved being pregnant. But I left work for the first time because I decided I wanted to be home with Liam. And so I was technically I was only out of work about 18 months because I got to continue my job. I was working for Beltone Hearing Aids at the time, and I stayed with them till he was 1. And then I didn't go back to work until he was 2.5, and I started at Weight Watchers. So for me, the 30s is more that moment, right? Because now I've moved into a job that I feel I'm paying it forward. At the time, it was exactly what I wanted to be doing. So now that gets me to having the first job where I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose, and I really, really loved it at the time. But then, yeah, we move into the 40s. And for me, that now Charlotte's, starting to Irish dance. And so I'm consumed by that. And so their 40s is interesting because it is a lot of focusing on the kids again, but in a different way. And then ultimately we moved to LA when I was 48, which seems like, God, that seems like I was so young. Is that right? Yeah, I'm 54, 6 years ago. Yeah. We moved on my 48th birthday.
Wow.
Huh. Sorry, I'm having a moment.
You are.
But otherwise, yeah, I mean, the 40s was its own thing because I loved my job. I loved Charlotte dancing. Liam was being creative. So he was watching him grow up was interesting. I don't know that I yet in my 40s felt the way I feel now. I really do feel like, and what is it? There's a Chiron you pass in your 50s. Like to me, the 50s, there was a definite shift that I don't know that I was feeling at all in my 40s. But so far, 50s, no question, my favorite decade.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's a tie for me because, and for personal reasons, my 50s have coincided with some of the roughest years for Griffin.
Right.
And so it's really hard for me to tease apart sometimes. Is it menopause? Is it epilepsy? Is it lack of sleep? Like, is it my 50s? Is it aging? Because I really do feel like my baseline is pretty, buoyant and joyful and mostly positive. I mean, I think I'm authentic. I don't think I shy away from going to day socks or, but
no,
but I feel like it's hard to tease apart. So
makes
I can't,
sense.
like my 40s, we weren't in this place yet. So, I finally had a lot of time to like build a business and really, spend time growing myself, and I felt the abundance, that goal to give from overflow was realized in my 40s. Like
Yeah.
that I didn't stop giving to others and only gave to myself. I just focused on me and realized like how that flowed much more beautifully for how things work around here. So
Yeah. And see, for me, I was probably so in the thick. I mean, Irish dance took up so much of our time and so much of our brain space, that I think I can't remember. I mean, I think of the 40s, I think of my 40s and I think of Irish dance. I
I
mean,
bet,
quite frankly,
yeah.
and so there's not that was bad. I fucking loved it. I loved watching Charlotte dance, and oh my God, my non-Irish heart was just so full of, it was just, so good. But I think there's the difference, right? So I have now moved into this place where Liam doesn't live here. Charlotte's so sufficient on her own.
Totally. And I think it's important to remember like this idea of quality of life, like the quality of our life had all these different factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where we were with our education and our training and our careers, where we
True.
were financially, where we were in our relationships, like all those things, right? Where we were living,
Yeah.
what was going on in the world, all that stuff. And it's subjective and it varies based on your culture, your region, your gender, all of that. I think some individuals in their 30s, maybe were like shining in their careers, right? I know that.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
plenty of
Yeah.
people like that,
True.
so it's just others, are facing challenges, or some people are getting laid off, and it really depends on the times. So I think it's obviously subjective. And again, this is what we know. And if it's helpful to like hear us reflect and have you reflect, we can't wait to hear, your reflections on this.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And as I'm listening to your version of your life, my version of mine, it just, the words that come to mind are flow, going with the flow, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, what I was also, where here I am going into coaching. I'm 48. I'm going into coaching. I'm feeling like this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. We're moving to LA. I'm like, this is my forever home, like all these great things. And at the same time, I'm getting 5 a.m. calls from my dad with dementia telling me everybody's stealing from him, so there's that thing of like, there's no smooth flow, right? There's always the bumps in the road. And I guess your quality of life is commiserate with that, and also commiserate with, do you resist or do you go with the flow? And we talk about this all the time on the pod. Resist persists versus going with the flow. Did I love getting those 5 a.m. phone calls? Absolutely not. But I was like, well, this is where I am in my life, and resisting it and getting angry about it, or being like, God damn it, why can't I just be happy in LA? Which Dan and
Yeah.
I have had those conversations. My dad got sick, his dad got sick, then my mom died, then his mom died. It was like, there in the 6 years we've lived here, there's been a lot going on. And we do kind of try to come back to that, and we live in LA, and lucky us, so there's some gratitude bits in there, I guess.
I love that you just said gratitude, because I literally was thinking I'm going to take us on a tangent. Now I'm not, because you said
Okay, good.
gratitude.
Go.
Because at this point of recording, the Barbie movie just came out, and it came up in the Barbie movie. And then with the Women's World Cup out, there's a wonderful ad running again, or like video running again about, the women professional female athletes, for so long not making as much as their male counterparts and being told to be grateful. And in the Barbie movie, it's like, be grateful. And I love that you and I've said all of this, and we didn't talk about gratitude. And yet, like, we also don't want to malign the word gratitude. Being grateful and focusing on the things that are good is human. It's like how we cope. And
100%.
And yet it's not the definition of like, well, I'm grateful for what I have, so it was a good decade, right? That's not it. Like, there was a lot of shit, right? Right. Like, I have a friend whose, family went through a lot last year with health in their family, and things were totally looking up. They were able to get themselves to Japan, and things went really well. And as soon as they got back, her mom, I don't know if her mom had the fall right before or after, but her mom had a health scare. And, and so, like, she's super grateful. She has friends checking in. She's super grateful they made it to Japan. But is she in hell right now? Yes. Right. Like, does it define her? No. Both. But has this been a fun summer? Fuck no. So it's I I think like the reality is we find moments and pockets of
Yeah.
joy and connection that help us when we look back at the decade go, ooh, gosh, friends were everything.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, my health was everything. And you don't see it at the time. So it is kind of neat.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great, yeah. Thank you. That's exactly right. And I think it helps you it's not about putting it into perspective per se, because I kind of hate that thought process too. But I think you hit it. It's the pockets, when you are going through shit, being grateful but for what you do have doesn't dismiss what you're going through.
Right.
Both things can be true at the same time.
I think it goes back to self-awareness. It's being aware that, you know, I could be in a beautiful place and be surrounded by people who care about me and still be having a really rough time.
Yes,
And yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, the duality.
So you put together, I'm sure you did the research, but you put together a list that can sometimes define quality of life or determine for many people. You want to kind of go through this and
Yeah.
discuss?
Yeah. And it's sort of a recap because we touched on it, but I think it's interesting to like, let's look at this and see what comes up. Like, I think economic status is so often associated with quality of life. And the way we hear this comes up, and we were going to mention this too, because we have all these boomers are becoming seniors and all of us are becoming retirees, like not
Yep.
yet, but a lot of our
Yeah.
contemporaries are starting to retire, which is so wonderful for them. Um, and we're like, within a decade of that. So we have this massive aging population. Things
Yes.
are, and in fact, side note, we always say another episode, we maybe could have a conversation about like those natural fears people have, which I feel like, bringing back Amy Pickard and Good to Go, I feel like it really helps with that.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to lose my memory. I'm afraid of like the financial, things that might be challenging if I live long. And I'm, afraid to lose my independence. So yeah,
Aaron's mostly afraid of pooping his pants.
yeah. I mean, that's real. That's real. And so so
Sorry,
like
Jared.
that's another episode. Like, like how do we face those fears and talk
Yeah.
about them in a way that helps us, like, because there's such an aging population, right?
Yeah.
And economic status comes up with that a lot because
No question.
every generation's like, are you going to do as well or better than your parents? Or is anyone ever going to do as well as their parents again or better than their parents again? Because that our parents definitely did.
Yes.
Right. They definitely were able to, move generationally out of the depression and buy homes and send their kids to college or take out loans to do that. Right. But they were able to do that. So economic status, employment, income, financial stability, those all like we cannot get away from the fact that those have a massive, they play a key role in quality of life.
No question.
They're not everything, but they definitely are part of it. So when we say salad days, but interestingly, those years that we felt like we were really stretching the dollar, like they were some of our most joyful. So it isn't the only thing.
Yeah, no. And so then the next one is health, right? And sort of your physical and mental health. It's the interesting thing to me about like both my dad and then my mother-in-law having dementia is that was more of a stress on us as the children. My sister and I with my dad, my Darren and his brother with his mom, they don't know what they don't know when they're going through Alzheimer's and dementia. And so the stress really lands on the kids at that point. And you do end up feeling like you are parenting your parents, and it typically would hit as it did, here we have our kids up and grown and on their own, and we're feeling that same toddler stress that we had, except it's with our parents. My mom passing unexpectedly, like she was really healthy. So she kind of went out on a high, which was, which again was one of those things that I try to remind myself when I'm sad about it, like lucky her,
Yeah, that's just true.
because so I joked about Darren, but I mean, those are the things he thinks about when he thinks about like both his mom and his grandmother lived pretty long lives. And watching them physically deteriorate, it's just, he's like, God, for the love of Pete, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's why I said physical and mental health too,
Yeah.
because like you said, the memory piece, or the amount of depression that happened in
Yeah.
isolated elderly during the lockdown, like during
Mhm.
quarantine and stuff. That was really rough. It's interesting when you just said toddlers, I started to giggle because it did bring me back to that time, because my mom, like, her dad was 98 and very lucid, and she seems like she will be the same way.
Yeah.
She's, and she, and Brendan's mom too. Oh my gosh. But, to, my brother installed a ring on her house. And this is when she was in Southern California, and none of us were within, like, a really quick
Right.
drive of her. So he was watching her on Ring, and we were really like parenting her in an annoying way. Like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
you need to go up to Aunt Margie's and stay there. Because she had people working on their house, and she wanted them to continue. She wanted her kitchen done. She's a cook. So she was like, I'm staying in my bedroom. I'm not seeing them. And like, she's like, I'm up at Margaret's or something. I don't know if she actually claimed to be up at Margaret's, but made us think she was going to head there. Maybe. I don't know. She listens, so I do not want to accuse her of lying. That's not what happened, but it was something of a, like, get off my back. And
Right.
then Julie and I and Mark are talking, and we're like, okay, like, we're not gonna be able to see her. How are we going to do this? We're very worried. And as we all were, we all didn't know like what was coming. And Mark's like, wait a second. She's like out in front of her house, because he has the Ring camera, talking to the guys and the people working on her house.
That is
handing them
hilarious.
stuff. And like the neighbor was over, and he was like, Mom. And she could like looked up. She's like, what are you me? It was so funny.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
So that part of it was funny, but maybe the joke was more on us.
Right. I feel like it might have been.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, truly, the times when we look back at intense stress, mental health, or like, I mean, God, I have incredibly talented, young, otherwise friends with severe back pain. And that really, takes
Chronic
them out.
pain,
yeah.
the worst. It doesn't matter how old you are. Chronic pain. Yeah. And so again, that's quality of life. It doesn't matter how old you are, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Liam was diagnosed with IBS, God, probably when he was 16 or 17. And man, before we got that diagnosis and he got on pills, he was in so much pain all the time. And yeah, so, I mean, the old adage, you have nothing if you don't have your health, is exactly right. It doesn't really matter what economic status you are. If you feel like shit all the time, your quality of life is low.
I do think of that a lot when, I remember really learning that and seeing that, and not having a ton of compassion for it yet, kind of being like, what's wrong? Someone's like, I threw up my back, and I'm like, get up. I was
so rude to my mom at my age.
And I didn't, knock on wood, like have to go through it. Finally, I think I just finally grew in maturity to realize like, wow, that must suck. Like just to even break a bone gave me so much more empathy for people who live with that kind of pain.
Yeah,
and I feel like going back and apologizing for all of that. Okay. Relationships. I think the presence of supportive relationships, such as family and friends, can contribute to a better quality of life. No question. We're humans. We are not meant to do this alone. We are meant to be interdependent. I've always hated that the word needy became like a negative, because it is human to need. We do need each other. We are not meant to like, interdependence is the goal, right? And yet bad relationships can also be like determine the quality of life in a decade or in a time of your life, like being, staying in one, or just having a rough one, or having strain in a relationship can really cascade into all other parts of your life. So I don't want to say that like some people being single, that was their best decade. So I think, like when you're in a healthy relationship with yourself and others, it doesn't mean like it's a committed legal thing. I think just having the presence of people you can count on, people who know you and love you, and that you can also, give and receive a relationship with, right? Like, I think that that's obvious.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot of studies that say one of the reasons women live longer is because we tend to have deeper relationships, specifically with other women, but just in general, Yeah. Now there's also a study that says married people don't last as long, live as long.
If you follow Chelsea Handler, she's like, there's all kinds of studies saying like the healthiest, happiest people in the world are single women who didn't have kids, which is so funny.
I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know any different, right? I mean, that could be totally
Yeah.
true. But I think the point being, don't look at somebody else's lifestyle and think theirs sucks. Their quality of life might be over the moon compared to yours.
Yeah. And don't think it's better either.
Right.
Yeah.
Better or worse. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So then next one is educational personal development. I mean, you've already presented this several times that, part of where I think our joy comes from, even in the midst of sorrow and pain, is that we have done the work. And again, that's not to say if you haven't done the work, you can't be joyful, but there is a lot of self-awareness that I can tap into that allows me to move through things in a way that I pre-becoming a coach, I wouldn't have been able to do. I'm just going to speak for myself. I mean, there's no question in my mind that when I decided to go through, I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, like one of my clients, when you go through a coaching certification, and I knew this of a lot of students who maybe will never build a business, but when I'd ask them what was their biggest takeaway from their experience becoming a coach, it was how much transformation they had gotten out of this. And if they went on to build a business, great, that was almost the cherry on top. But the learning how to actively listen and mirror and be on somebody else's quote unquote map was so transformational for them, that it really, I mean, that's why we keep doing the things we're doing, right? You and I we're digging into human design, and my new big thing is the 4 agreements, which I'm the last person on earth to have read. But there's just all these ways to learn how to be a better human, which I just think makes you happier and helps on the quality of life.
I agree 100%. And I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. I think we've said several times to each other, if not on air or not on recording, that, what you want all young people to know before they enter into relationships or before they start like thinking about their life is you never sell yourself short and say, this is how I am. Like we should always be growing. We should always be wanting to like get to the next level of ourselves. Right. Or like expand into a new chapter, into new skills or new ideas. And I don't know that I was aware of that, but I've always just been curious. And that did lead me to grad school. And then I, pursued, wanting to study nutrition and then coaching and NLP and all this stuff. So I agree. I've followed my passions and curiosity, and I'm better for it. And I'm super impressed with young people now. And like this Carrie Peters, I remember hearing her years ago, like 9 or 10 years ago. She just got married and talk about how she knew she was manifesting a partner who, and one of her absolute non-negotiables was they have to be into improvement. They have to be into self-improvement. They have to, be dedicated to constantly growing. And I remember being like, well, that's wise. I think everybody would like to go back to their old selves and say, before we enter into something and say, I hope you never change. Let's change it to like, I hope you do change. And I hope we're there to support each other all the way through it. Right. So love that. I do think that's a big piece. And it does like learning, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and the more humble and kind and patient we become with each other.
I felt like I wanted that little rainbow from NBC to come. The more you know, ding, 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 ding.
Oh yeah. I love that. Environment, living conditions, totally safety, access to amenities that can affect one's quality of life. Yes. If you spent time in like, hurricane corridor or places where a volcano blew up, like there's that definitely affected that part of your life. I know people who fall in both those categories. So that's definitely true,
Yeah. And, we also know people who grew up in an environment that wasn't favorable, and
they thrived.
And they did the personal growth work, and they had relationships, and they moved on into environments that helped them thrive more, and then brought people with them, which is lovely too. So it
Well,
goes back to what you just said, this idea of like, this is who I am, this is my lot in life. It doesn't have to be. It may not change to 180 degrees, but that 1% change, can be
well,
impactful.
I do think again, when resources are tight, you're forced to get inventive, right? So
Yes.
you're forced, like ingenuity comes from necessity always.
Yeah.
Um, like that's always true. And not that we also don't need to be interdependent and get help or support each other, but for sure it can be motivating.
Yeah. And then hobbies and interests, it's for me, I mean, obviously we've said this a ton, like music's everything for me, it always has been. Um, Watching my children and their art is amazing. But to go back to my dad, like I remember thinking that was so sad that he used to read like 3 books a week. He used to say that if he lost his eyesight, he didn't know what he would do because he loved reading. And that just dissipates when you have mental health issues and dementia. And so those are the kinds of things I think that made my sister and I the saddest, to watch him not do those things that he was in love with anymore. And then again, the reverse is my mom was out for a walk on a beautiful spring day and her tree had just flowered, and so she died really happy.
Mm, yeah.
So having things that are yours. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, hobbies and interests, right? Or what are yours that you get to pursue? Darren and I don't like the same things. I work out. He doesn't like that. He watches, Italian horror films. I don't like that. So we have our own separate interests that keep us sharp, and we share when we want to, but it doesn't always have. I think having something solitary to yourself is important.
Agree. I mean, that's kind of where environment and like, activities and interests can go together. Like somebody who really loves living near the ocean or like, near a lake or a mountain trail and loves to get outside. That those kind of always go together too. When you were saying what you were just saying, it was making me think of a client who has gone through a really rough time, and was glad I reminded her that she likes to paint, and she got out her canvases and was like, God, it's amazing how that helps me come out of a funk, or how that helps me manage a
Yeah.
funk. And so I think it's true. And I know we've talked about this before, but the reminder that I learned a long time ago, that when things are rough, your quality of life is like hard to get around. Like I feel like beaten down by so many of these different areas. They're not going well. I lost my job. I don't feel good. Like all those things. The way you can access some, I don't know if it's control or some say over how it's going, is by doing something you love.
Yeah.
Just because, not because it's going to get you the job or help you feel better, but because it helps you access a part of yourself that you like,
Mm.
and helps you start to feel more yourself. And maybe that can lead to feeling more resourced, maybe not, but for her, it was definitely, it helped her feel good at something.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. So those are some things that can affect your quality of life that I do think to some extent you might have control over. I mean, economic status, maybe not so much, but I mean, thinking about if you're looking at economic status, health, relationships, educational, personal development, environment, hobbies and interests, what can you do in each of those areas or one of those areas that could improve your quality of life? And again, not that it's trying to go from 0 to 60, but what can you do to just make your life 1% happier, better, more
Mhm.
joyful? Pick one of those and see what you could put your attention to.
Mm, I love that. You just made me think of a couple people where it's like that one thing that's been stressing you out for decades. Why don't you give that a little love and attention?
Yeah. Well, we had that great session that we both learned, Wheel of Life, where
Right.
you look
Right.
at all these areas of your life, and where on this wheel, where on the continuum are you happy or content or discontent? And again, spoiler alert, nobody's wheel is ever perfectly round. most of them look like a hot mess.
Right.
But you get to focus on, okay, that's what I want to put my attention to now, or something's lacking. Like for me, one of mine's always very low on home cooking. I don't like to cook. I can, I just don't like to. And so I'm not ever going to put my attention there. You know, I'm happy with that being. And then I guess as I'm saying this, then I guess I put it on the high because I don't want to cook. So home cooking's fine.
That's funny. It's funny. I didn't even think home cooking was on that.
It's on
Was
the
on that
big
wheel.
wheel of life. Yeah. Or
Okay.
cooking. Yeah. Cooking. I think it is like cooking from home because, you know, it
Yeah.
came from health coaching. So
Of course, that
yeah.
makes so much sense. Well, I'm sure I'm good on that one because
Yeah, you're great on that one. I'm
well,
great when I want to, but I just don't. I'm like I said, if I could just hire somebody to come in and cook for me all the time. But right now, that's one of the things we talked about this on the menopause pod. Like that is one of the big ones is I don't like food anymore. It's just boring to me. If I
so
could, if I could
food
just
has
have like a
nothing.
little.
Food has nothing to do with your quality of life in this
Food
decade.
has
That's okay.
nothing to do with my quality. I am not a foodie. I just eat to make sure my body keeps working at this point. So you picked a great song. You gave me a couple of options. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. It's just a fun one. And it takes us back to our teens, early 20s for sure.
Yes. I'm still standing by Elton John. I picture that video that
I know.
because we're the generation of MTV when it but like
And I think it was
feeling
on
like a
Venice.
little kid. It was, I think it was Venice Beach. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So all the things just coming into play.
Yes. Like I'm still standing better than I ever did, feeling like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid or looking like something like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm still standing after all this time.
Yeah.
Picking up the pieces of my life. Yeah. I love that song.
I do too. Well, this has been a fun little conversation, unexpected. So I want to again shout out Julie Stoltz for giving us this idea. This is the second time she's given us an idea. So if you all think when we say, let us know what you want us to talk about, that we won't listen to you, we totally do. So thank you, Julie, for giving us this topic. And we look forward to sharing Sarah and Sherry with you in the upcoming weeks so you can hear about the decades that Kari and I have not yet entered into. We're excited to hear what they have to tell us about how the best is now behind us.
Totally. And that's it. We will see you next week. But for now, we will say so long and remind you that you can join our email list. And you can do that by going, where do we want them to do that?
Go straight to the website, the things we know podcast.com. And if you scroll down, you're listening to this, so you don't need to press the listen button because you're already listening. But if you keep scrolling down, you will see a subscribe button and you will get our 10 ways to give less of a fuck. Something like that. I don't know what it is, but just you'll know how to give less fucks when you subscribe to our mailing list.
And we love that you're following us and we can't wait to hear from you.
Yep. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back next week.
Bye-bye.